Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back for another week here on 1029 The Game and the Coastal Sports Digital Network. I'm Lloyd Vance, veteran NFL writer, been around the league a long time, and so glad you're here on my show to um, talk football, man. It's an exciting time around the National Football League, and a big thing is we finally have some games to talk about. I know it's preseason, everybody, and but I had a fun time this first week watching all the preseason games. Kevin will be here shortly, and we're going to recap all the action from preseason week one. We'll talk about the holdouts, the hold ins, uh, injuries, lots of that to get to around the National Football League. And big thing we're going to do is talk about camp tours around the National Football League. Our featured guest will be Matt Lombardo. He is from Heavy.com and veteran writer around the league. I've known him for a long time. We used to do stuff in Westchester together, and so glad to get him on. He's now with Substack, and you can check his stuff out there. I'm sure he'll be able to plug it once he comes on about 8:15. But got to start with one of my favorite emailers, Matt from West Palm Beach, Florida, texted me yet I guess it was Sunday, and he said this was the greatest series of games in preseason history. And I was like, all right, all right. Uh, how much cake you got on one of these games? And sure enough, he said to me, he's like, I need the over in the Jets game against the Green Bay Packers. And it was the over under was 39, I believe, and he got it at the final score was 30-10 Packers. So he beat the 39. But I got to tell you, and I told him I was like, man, this is preseason. These games sort of matter, and you got to always remember, yes, great performances that we'll talk about in a minute in some of these games. Uh, some not so great performances, but a lot of these guys that are playing, they'll be pumping gas in Jersey in a couple weeks. The rosters on August 26th will go from 90 players to 53, and a lot of the people that we have playing now, they're just not going to be on the 53-man roster or the 16-man practice squad. So it's something, that you have to be mindful of. And there were some good performances, though, and everybody wants to talk about Shador Sanders. Shador Sanders finally got his opportunity. I was on with Rich Quinones on his show today, and he was saying to me, well, earlier in the week, he was like, Lloyd, I'm hearing that, they're setting the kid up to fail. Well, I just didn't believe that. I just thought he needs his opportunity, and he's going to get it, because they wouldn't have drafted him just to kind of put egg on his face and his father's. I know that the Sanders can be, some people say Dion's abrasive, and Shador kind of had a high opinion of himself, but I thought Shador handled himself very well in getting his first start preseason. It was the Cleveland Browns 30, the Carolina Panthers 10. And the thing is, with Shador, looked very sharp in terms of leading his team. Shador was 14 of 23 for 138 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and then he ran for 19 as well. We've always kind of wondered, okay, does he have the wheels? Because his father was Deion Sanders, one of the fastest guys in NFL history, but he wasn't really a runner at Colorado. But I thought he looked very good. And the big thing was I saw some touch, especially on that one touchdown pass that he threw. He kind of lobbed it over one guy and drilled it in, and did a nice job. So I think Shador Sanders will continue to get his opportunities in training camp and preseason. Um, a big thing is the Browns are going to be going against the Eagles this Saturday. I'll be going to the game and kind of doing some scouting in terms of what Shador's looking like there, and the rest of the Browns. I think in terms of the roster overall, the head coach Kevin Stefanski, he's on a hot seat, and maybe even the GM Andrew Barry with the owner Jimmy Haslam um, going into the season, and they're not going to cut their nose off to spite their face in terms of if Shador is the best quarterback, they're going to give him a chance. The Browns do have a very difficult schedule, playing in that tough AFC North, where they're playing the Steelers twice, or playing the Bengals twice, one of the teams who I think will kind of step forward this year. And they just missed making the playoffs last year. I think they're going to jump into the fray this season. And then obviously the Ravens head and shoulders above everybody else with Lamar Jackson and that roster that Eric DeCosta's put together. So lots to talk about in terms of the Cleveland Browns. We'll get to that with Matt Lombardo. Uh, is doing a great job in terms of a camp tour. So I used to do it back in the day, and now Matt has done a nice job in terms of hitting a lot of the teams in the Mid Atlantic region, uh, and in the northeast portion of the country. So he's visited the Giants. He was at the Commanders, the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Eagles. So we'll get a good understanding of how these teams look in camp, because I think the camp is the most important thing. I was talking with Angel before we came on, and I think, in terms of these preseason games, yeah, you're getting a good look at some of these guys, but the veterans aren't playing. I think, the preseason workouts, or the joint workouts with other teams are more important, where you're getting live reps out there against the number ones versus the number ones. Some number twos are playing against each other, and you're getting a better opportunity, because let's face it, different coaches approach training camp and preseason games differently. For many years, as you all know, I covered the Eagles, and Andy Reid ran a tough camp. I remember talking to players, and they would say, "Oh, they got us out here 2 a days and pads, and he's not letting up, man, and they're on my back 24/7." And he's kind of done the same thing with Kansas City. He's making sure that Kansas City team is sharp. Even Patrick Mahomes is playing in these preseason games, having his reps. And then you look at the LA Rams, who've had some success with Sean McVay. McVay is all about, okay, I just want my guys to be healthy. I don't want them to get injured. I'm not gonna play as many guys out there, and we're just kind of work forward in terms of setting the table for the season coming up. So different approaches, but I think, I a lot of it has to do with the coach and how established he is with his roster and his team, and the general manager in terms of the team that they've built, and bringing those 90 players together to kind of say, okay, we're going to build a 53-man roster from this. Uh, uh, Interesting enough, definitely want to see how the Eagles are going to do this Saturday against the Browns. And the Eagles, that was an interesting game. And we'll talk about it when Kevin jumps on. The Eagles, their DBs kind of struggle, and the Bengals have decided that Zach Taylor, their head coach, and Duke Tobin, their general manager, have decided, you know what, we really need to be ready to hit the ground running in the season, because Joe Burrow, and this is crazy. I looked this up. Joe Burrow 1-9 in weeks 1 and 2 in his career as a starter. So they have had notorious slow starts with Joe Burrow at the helm. And in 2019 and in 2024, last season, they dug an unmanageable hole of 0-3. So they went out against the Eagles, and Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase were out there, and they were competing. They made sure that the Eagles backups understood. They were coming for blood in those first couple drives, and Burrow ends up 9 for 10, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns. Chase 4 catches, 77 yards, and on that 36-yard touchdown, I mean, he catches the pass, and then he spins Ringo around like a top, and then just runs right by him into the end zone. So the Eagles, they did trade for a cornerback last week, and we can kind of talk to Matt and Kevin about that. But um, that's an area kind of concern. You know, Adoree Jackson, he did not look the best. Eli Ricks, Kaylee Ringo, these are all the cornerbacks that are trying to replace Darius Slay, who's now on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it's an area. It's like, okay, all right, is this going to be a problem for the Eagles? So I want to get Matt's take on that and Kevin's take on that. Something to work on, but not a lot to worry about for the Philadelphia Eagles in terms of their roster. I think when it comes to September 4th, they play the Dallas Cowboys in the opener for the league. Everybody's looking forward to that. I would say, all right, the opposite corner, the third wide receiver, who's that going to be? And then Jake Elliott. A lot of people forgot about last season. He was struggling at the end of the regular season, missing extra points, and it was kind of shaky. Now he got it together in the playoffs, hit some big kicks, particularly in the Super Bowl. He made, I think he was 3 for 3 in the Super Bowl. But they're going to need him to play at a very high level. So some areas that we'll talk about with those guys in terms of the Eagles. But I thought, what a great win for the Eagles in terms, and it's preseason, so grain of salt. I know everybody, but you can't talk about preseason week one. And if I gave a game ball, it probably would go to Tanner McKee. Tanner McKee for the Eagles was lights out at quarterback. I mean, he's 20 of 25, 252 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Yes, I know who he's playing against and everything, but it was a great effort. One of my loyal emailers, Dave from Ridley, he said right away, he said, if I'm the Saints, I'm trying to call the Eagles to see if we can maybe get McKee in a trade, because everyone knows that the Saints are kind of desperate in terms of their quarterback situation. Um, Spencer Rattler, he's right now maybe the starter. Tyler Shook is the rookie quarterback they brought in, but neither of them have really impressed. And I think that's an area of need for them. And maybe they can say, okay, whether it's Tanner McKee or it's Jameis Winston coming from the Giants, making a change, because right now their quarterback situation is kind of desperate for them. Um, I do think, though, that in terms of, there's one other quarterback that maybe enter in the mix in terms of a trading marker, and that's the New York Giants quarterback, Jameis Winston. Now, Winston has kind of endeared himself with the team, and they're excited to have him, but they already have Russell Wilson, who's probably the de facto starter. And then they have Jackson Dart. And Jackson Dart looked very good in the preseason for them in week one. He was 12 of 19, 154 yards, 1 touchdown, made some really nice throws, and he even got outside the pocket, 3 attempts for 24 yards rushing. And we hadn't seen a lot of that from him at USC or at Mississippi, but he looked in control. And you'd have to say, much like I was talking about Shedeur Sanders earlier, that yes, they may go with the veteran quarterback with Joe Flacco in Cleveland and Russell Wilson with the Giants, but why not have these younger startup guys as the backup? So I think Jackson Dart may have an opportunity to be the backup for the Giants, and then maybe they use Jameis Winston as a trading chip, because let's face it, I mean, the Saints need somebody else, and it may take an injury or something like that, or you know, for Kirk Cousins to move from the Falcons, or one of these other veterans around the league. But I think around August 26th, which is cut down day, there may be some trading activity, and you may see one of these veteran quarterbacks go to one of these quarterback needy teams. Now, the other thing, obviously, is, do one of these quarterback needy teams say, no, we're just going to sit back and wait for the Arch Manning sweepstakes? Arch Manning, coming from the University of Texas, a young man that everybody's excited about, thinks that he may be a possible number one overall pick. Now, his grandfather Archie came out though and said, no, he's going back to school. So I don't believe him. And if he has a season that we think he will, I think that Arch Manning will be in the draft and he will be a very high pick. And I think we have Kevin Midgette now. He got his technical difficulties squared away. Kevin Midgette, how you doing, buddy? All right, Kevin's still logging in or something. I could see him, but I don't know if he can hear me. But we are on Sports Radio 1029, The Game, the Coastal Sports Digital Network. So glad that everybody could be here with us this evening. We finally got some football. Yes, we had the Hall of Fame game, and the Lions played pretty well in that game, and you saw them win. But this week we had a full slate of games, and I had the pleasure of writing up basically 16 games and looking at the tape and watching all the storylines and um, just a lot to talk about around the league. And I think a big thing though is, and let's try to bring Kevin in again. A big thing is injuries. I think injuries are going to be a situation around the National Football League. We know this in terms they've cut back on a number of OTAs and how long players can train in off season, et cetera. And I think that kind of lends to, sometimes their bodies aren't fully ready, for the grind of camp. And you're seeing some of these soft tissue and tear type injuries around the National Football League. Unfortunately, the Eagles on Sunday, they had their stadium, fly night, where I bring all the fans in. They have 50,000 fans out there, to the credit, Eagles fans are really hyped. 50,000 fans out there. Unfortunately, their all pro guard Landon Dickerson, uh, he had a sprained MCL. They carted him off. Um, Everybody I talked to said that it's going to be week to week, so it's not as bad as it looked early on. But there's a lot of situations with that, and you're seeing that around the National Football League in terms of these injuries. And unfortunately, in Minnesota, you had Rondale Moore, who just joined the team, and on the opening kickoff, Rondale Moore tore his left ACL, and he's out for the season. So, it can happen that quick around the league, and in terms of injuries. So Rondale Moore, Tennessee Titans running back Tajay Spears, he has a high ankle sprain, so they're gonna have to work through that. Another big one is for the LA Rams. And I think this is going to affect a lot in terms of, fantasy football and everything, and Puka Nakua targets and Devontae Adams targets. Matthew Stafford, he's got a bad back injury to the point that he's getting an epidural, and he's 37 years old. So it's like, oh man, is he going to be able to withstand that, be healthy, be out there and be contributing? Because that at that age, that injury could be tough. So it's something that we're going to have to monitor. But definitely, injuries are big this time of year. Uh, Holden, and I think we have Kevin Midgette. Kevin, can you hear me? All right. Well, punch Kevin down, but I see my man in the green room. Spring him in.
What's up, Lloyd?
Hey, I've been doing this show by myself. Kevin's had technical difficulties, but
Yeah.
had to bring my guy in, man, from the old days. My take it to the house guy. He's a family man now. I used to be the family man. Now he's got kids and all the fun stuff. How you doing? It's Matt Lombardo. Join us. Matt, tell us where, give your plugs. I think you're at theheavy.com. Where can people find your stuff now?
Yeah, Lloyd, I'm fired up to be here. Thanks for having me. It's great to connect after all these years and doing the work together back when I was in Westchester and just starting to cover the league. And those were the good old days. They really
Oh
were.
yeah,
But people can check me out on Substack. It's mattlombardo.nfl.substack.com. It's between the hash marks. I run a weekly column every Monday morning, kind of that all encompassing Monday column that people have come to love and look forward to, looking into the biggest storylines across the league. We have a podcast every Tuesday, a mailbag on Fridays, lots of features and in depth reporting. And you can also find me at heavy.com as well.
nice, nice. And you're on X still. I know you were kind of you doing
I'm
that.
actually on Threads. You can check me out
You're on
on
Threads.
Threads
Okay,
at Matt Lombardo NFL, and I'm also on Blue Sky. I haven't been on
gotcha.
X for a
There
little
you
while,
go.
but you can find me on Threads and Blue Sky.
So find them there, people. All right, and I brought you on for a specific week point, Matt. You've been doing the camp tours. Now, if I understand, you were at the Giants, Commanders, was it Steelers, Ravens,
Yep.
Eagles?
Yep, Steelers, and then the Ravens are actually going to close down the scheduled portion of the
Okay.
tour on Wednesday morning. There might be a couple of joint practices that are added in, but as far as the initial tour schedule that comes out, when the concert promoters blow it out of the water, it's coming to an end on Wednesday. But yeah, Lloyd, checking out the Giants, absolute vibe up there. The Commanders look like they're ready to at least repeat the success they had a year ago, maybe even take a leap from there with the roster they have in place. And the Steelers, an interesting team to say the least. And
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting eyes on the Ravens, one of the deepest rosters in the NFL. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, a ferocious defense. That should be a lot of fun.
Nice. So, Matt, we'll start with the New York Giants. And I know you know that team very well because you did some great work for NJ.com up there. In terms of the starting quarterback situation, is it really a camp battle or is it Russell Wilson? We saw Jackson Dart look very good this weekend in the first preseason game.
Yeah, as far as Brian Dable, everything he says, everything that emanates from the Quest Diagnostic Training Center is that Russell Wilson is the week one starter, that there is no real quarterback battle. The plan is to move forward with Russell Wilson. But Lloyd, I got to tell you, my core belief, you and I have talked about this dating back to when I covered the Eagles and Carson Wentz and Sam Bradford and that trade going down. My core belief is that if you have a rookie quarterback, especially one that you've chosen in the first round, if he's ready to play, you play him. Both from a developmental standpoint, from in their case, an evaluation standpoint, because of how deep the quarterback class is next year. The fact that Dart was the 25th overall pick, and I don't know about you, Lloyd, but watching that game on Saturday, Jackson Dart sure looked like he's ready to be a starting quarterback. To throw to little Jordan Humphrey on the touchdown between two defenders, an absolute dart down the field, looked comfortable in the pocket. And if I'm the Giants, at bare minimum, I'm throwing open that quarterback competition the rest of this preseason, but I don't know if they will do that or not.
Yeah, and I think maybe look for a trading partner for Jameis Winston, because at the minimum,
Yeah.
you got to have Dart as your backup at least. I mean, he's played so well, and I do agree with you. Put the kid out there, give him his chance, and I think the Giants. What do you think in terms of the hot seat? Everybody's saying Joe Shane on the hot seat, Brian Dable. Are they going to survive this? But I thought Abdul Carter, that was a great pick, and that defensive line is at least going to be a story to talk about.
Yeah, Lloyd, I think that both Joe Shane and Brian Dable are on the hottest seats across the NFL for a general manager and a head coach. But I do think, just from watching Giants training camp, just from talking to people in that building, just from having watched every snap of Abdul Carter's collegiate career up at Penn State, he's a game-changing game wrecker. And as Carl Banks told me last week for the column, he brings the Giants into the modern day NFL of how they can play defense in terms of how the pressure it takes off of the secondary, whether you even need to blitz when you have edge rushers like an Abdul Carter, a Brian Burns, and a Kayvon Thibodeau. I don't think the Giants are one of these teams where you can start talking playoffs or anything outrageous like that. But just the talent in place, the upgrades up front on defense, some of the receivers stepping up, especially Malik Neighbors at wide receiver. If Russell Wilson works out and he loves to push the ball downfield, Malik Neighbors is an explosive talent. I think the Giants can push for like 7 wins and be competitive and show signs of life. And if they're showing signs of making steps in the right direction by season's end, John Mara, he's been in a hurry to fire general managers and head coaches over the last decade. I think that this is the time to be patient. I think he will be patient if they take steps in the right direction. I think they're going to be better. I don't think they're a playoff team, but I think they're going to push for 500 and be in a lot of games because of that defense.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And a lot of people say, "Oh, they're going to be one of the worst," and no, they're going to be a competitive team. And he showed his patience in terms of bringing them back, this season because people were already calling for their heads before the season started. So the Giants, I do agree with you, will be better. We'll see if they hit their projected over under. But going down the highway from Philadelphia, and we'll save them for kind of last. The Washington Commanders. Now, story of last year, Jaden Daniels, Mr. Excitement. Everybody said, "Oh, he's the new guy." Could have been MVP as a rookie, run Rookie of the Year. Did some things in playoffs. What do we see from Jaden Daniels? And is there enough talent around him with the Commanders?
Yeah, Lloyd, I'm all in on Jaden Daniels. I think he is the next great quarterback in the NFL, following in the footsteps of the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen's, and Lamar Jackson's. I think he's going to play his way into that pantheon. I don't see any reason to think that he's going to have any sort of sophomore slump or take a step back. And the practice I was down for the Saturday morning, it was electric. And that was with Terry McLaurin holding out. That was with Terry McLaurin requesting a trade 20 hours before practice got underway that day. Debo Samuel is going to be a focal point of that offense. We saw him run some end arounds that day. They very good down near the red zone. But I'll say this. I was really pleasantly surprised to see Zach Ertz seem like he found the fountain of youth, not just last year where he became one of Jaden Daniels' favorite targets, but that day, they worked the offense down the seams. He was catching passes over the middle. And it really seems like Zach Ertz is one of Jaden Daniels' favorite targets. And you talk about the talent they have around him. Debo Samuel and Terry McLaurin, you'll put that combo up against one of the top 10 receiver duos in the league. The offensive line is better when you bring in Laramie Tunsil. That's an upgrade there. That's going to take some pressure off of Jaden Daniels. And the defense, they're really high on Trey Amos, the cornerback they drafted, I believe, in the second round or third round this year. Ball hawk, really good skills and coverage. I think that when you look at the landscape of the NFC, the Detroit Lions are going to be in some trouble because of all these injuries, and you're going to have a learning curve because of breaking in two new coordinators. The Eagles are the Eagles. I think they're still the deepest roster in the NFL. But the Commanders are right in that mix, man. You put the Commanders in that pantheon in the NFC, and anything can happen now that they have some experience. But I'll say this, Lloyd, I think what impressed me more than the talent, which is definitely there, there's a hyper competitive culture in Washington, and it all stems from Dan Quinn. I spoke with Bobby Wagner after practice about it, and he said that it's not just the competitiveness from Dan Quinn, it's the fact that he cares so much about his players. These guys run through a wall for him, and they just feel like a team that arrived ahead of schedule last year. I think they're still peaking, and it all depends on Jaden Daniels. But I'm a believer Jaden Daniels is going to take a step rather than a step back.
Yeah, and the big story with Washington, and want to get your take on. I know if you got a chance to talk to Adam Peters, Terry McLaurin. Are they going to give him his extension? I mean, he's holding in right now. What's going to happen there?
Yeah, it really feels like this is one of these things that's going to get done, right? It feels like the trade request was a leverage play. Dan Quinn that day I was there at practice said that Terry McLaurin told him about the trade request ahead of time, that he supports his players getting their money and all those sort of things. It feels like Terry McLaurin is trying to grasp whatever leverage he can find in these negotiations because he really doesn't have any. But that day after practice, he comes walking out of the facility and daps up Joshua Harris, the owner, and talks to him for 5 minutes. Didn't seem like there was any real ill will. So if we're reading the tea leaves and we're trying to see how this is going to happen, I don't think Terry McLaurin steps on a practice field during training camp. I don't think you see him in the preseason. August 28th rolls around, and all of a sudden, I think you're going to see $27 million fall out of the sky.
Right. And the big thing is they're all holding in now,
Yeah.
because they're not holding out because it's 50 grand a day and nobody wants to accrue those penalties that they have to pay. So we're here talking with Matt Lombardo here on SR 1029 The Game, Coastal Sports Digital Network. So glad he's here with us. doing some great stuff around the league. Check his stuff out on Substack, heavy.com. I mean, and in the Philadelphia area, what you were on Channel 29 the other night, right? Fox.
Yeah, do some work for Fox 29 during football season, do some college football work for them, and pop on and talk Eagles and NFL a few times a month on their 11:30 sports show. So it's a lot of
Nice.
fun.
All right, so check Matt out all around there. I have lots of Philadelphia watchers, my whole family. They're all season ticket holders, my cousins, and they all say I'm an Eagles hater because I don't drink the green Kool-Aid, you know what I mean? But they're a very good team. And let's start talking about the Eagles. So the other night, Joe Burrow was moving up and down that field. Him and Jamar Chase. Is this something you need to worry about? That other quarterback position, Adoree Jackson, Kaylee Ringo, Eli Ricks. Who's it going to be? And is that something fans should be concerned about?
But I'll say this, Joe Burrow is going to do that to 29, 30 secondaries across the NFL, let alone when you don't have the starting defensive line in your face. Joe Burrow, to me, is a top three quarterback in this league, might even be higher than that. Jamar Chase, top receiver in the league, according to a lot of people who understand the game and who are inside the league. So I think that the issues in the Eagles secondary, other than Quinyon Mitchell, who's an ascending star, they were kind of exaggerated in that game, but I do think that the concerns are very real. I think they were waiting for Ringo to take the step that he hasn't taken during training camp. I think that they expected to get more out of Eli Ricks. Vic Fangio doesn't seem all that enthralled whatsoever about Adoree Jackson. When you hear him talk about Adoree Jackson, I wrote today on heavy.com that you look around. Asante Samuel Jr. is still sitting out there. And there's a guy with 3 years of experience. He's played in the postseason. He has like 6 interceptions in his career. I know he's coming off the neck injury, but if you're the Eagles and you're sitting there and you're not sure whether Cooper DeJean is a perimeter cornerback, if you're going to play him on the boundary, whether you'd rather have him in the slot, if you're going to play him at safety because you don't know who you're going to play alongside Blankenship, I think Asante Samuel Jr. could be a really fascinating name to watch if he's healthy for the Eagles to bring in for the latter half of this preseason. Take a flyer on him to see if he can. He's a known starter in this league. He started some big games for the Chargers. See if he can lock down that number two role.
Yeah, and I know that the Ravens lost a cornerback, and everybody's saying, okay, maybe they should talk to Asante Samuel Jr., Stephon Gilmore. So these are the type of guys that are out there. Uh, Not a lot of holes when I look at the Eagles roster. Maybe a third receiver, what's going on there, and the offensive line and flux now that Dickerson got hurt a little bit. He's kind of week to week. But just talking about, do you see any holes with this Eagles roster?
The only one that I really see, Lloyd, is about that second cornerback spot. I do think that the concerns there are very real. I do think that when you look at Dory Jackson not stepping up, Kelly Ringo not taking any real steps in his development, I do think that that could be a vulnerability in a division where you're playing twice each season. Malik Neighbors, and you're playing C.D. Lamb and George Pickens. You're playing Terry McLaurin and Debo Samuel. To me, that's the blind spot. Safety is still a bit of an open question for them. Who are you playing alongside Reed Blankenship? Is Drew Makuba the second round pick, who they're really high on? Is he healthy enough? Does he get up to speed quickly enough over the second half of training camp after dealing with that shoulder surgery? Does he win that safety job? What do you do at second corner? But other than that, I really think this is the deepest roster in the league. Starters, second string, and the talent just at the top. They're the prohibitive favorite to win the NFC, go back to the Super Bowl, in my opinion. And there's a reason why, when you look at ESPN, the future power rankings, they're the number one team in the league. Howie Roseman has done a great job of developing talent, paying them early, and then buttressing that young talent with top of market free agents like a Saquon Barkley, like a bold trade for AJ Brown. I don't think that philosophy is going to change. And they have the most dominant offensive and defensive line in football. You have those pieces in place, you're going to be in the mix.
They are going to be in the mix, and I think in terms of the NFC, they're right at the top, and they're going to break that streak, Matt. In terms of the division, we've always talked about, what, 20 years since a back-to-back champion in NFC East. Do you think they are going to have the ability to do that?
It's them in Washington, right? I think it's a two-team race. I don't think they're going to run away with the division. I think the Eagles wind up winning it. But if you came to me on December 20th and said that, hey, the Commanders have a one-game lead with 2 weeks to play, that wouldn't shock me one bit either. I think those are the two of the deepest teams in the conference. They happen to share a division. They always play each other tough. Commanders, stole one from them down in Washington last year. It'll be an interesting race in this division, but I think the Giants still have a long ways to go, and the Cowboys are going to be better. I think the Cowboys are a playoff team, but I don't think that I don't think that the vibes are in Oxnard where they need to be to mount a run at Philadelphia in the division.
Yeah, and we're talking Matt Lombardo here on SR 1029 The Game, Coastal Sports Digital Network. Now, Matt, we cannot talk about the Cowboys without talking about their situation. Is Jerry going to get out of his own way? I mean, Micah Parsons, he's making him wait. He had Dak wait before, Zach Martin. I mean, what is he doing? And I always say this team is not going to change until he gives up that GM title.
Yeah, well, none of this makes sense, right? And I said this on the podcast last week. It's almost as if Jerry Jones, for some reason, is acting like the Dallas Cowboys are a poverty franchise because, he's afraid to spend money at the top of the market before the market develops. But then you have to overpay for Dak Prescott, for CD Lamb, for Zach Martin, and you're going to have to overpay, probably looking at $45 million a year for Micah Parsons. Lloyd, I can't get a read on this situation because deep down you have to believe that they'll get something done here, right? You have to believe that the Cowboys look at Micah Parsons as a top three edge rusher in this league, perennial defensive player of the year contender, centerpiece of what they do, one of their most important players. You think they would get this done. You think that Jerry would or Steven, somebody would figure out a way to get this done. But you read the trade request from Micah Parsons. And the fact that he went so scorched earth, the fact that he accused Jerry Jones publicly of luring him into a meeting about team leadership only to have contract negotiations with him one on one and then hold him to those conversations. It really feels like Micah Parsons might be done here. And Jones has played this game before, as we've talked about, but it just feels like Micah Parsons might be the one who says, you know what, I deserve better than this. I could see a situation where he forces his way out and forces the Cowboys to trade him. End of the day, I think a deal gets done September 1st or whatever, right before the season starts. Maybe after the first game, maybe it's a Chris Jones situation where, he sits for a game and then they figure it out after that. But I think there's a non-zero chance that he's elsewhere, if not this year, going into 2026.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is he's 26, and we all know players are not liking that fifth year option that the team has, and they use it right away on these high end first rounders. But I agree with you; they got to sign him. And David Muglada is his agent, and I'm hearing Jerry's not even talking to him; he's trying to negotiate with Parsons. It is just a circus, but I think Jones is happy as long as the Cowboys are, the lead story on
Yeah.
Sports Center. It doesn't matter how good they are, they're kind of an afterthought in terms of wins, because they're not winning playoff games. And this season, I might say, all right, maybe they're 8-9 team, kind of what you're alluding to, maybe a 10-win sneak into playoffs at 6-7 spot. But lots of drama there. They got to fix that up. But before we let Matt get out of here, and I really appreciate him getting on the Ravens, and you're going to visit them. Everybody's saying this is the season for the Baltimore Ravens. And, Lamar Jackson, two-time MVP. Do they have what it takes to beat the Chiefs and the Bills to get to the Super Bowl and represent the AFC? The roster is very stacked. I think, the Eagles, I put 1A and then 1B.
Yeah, well, it'll give you and your listeners and viewers a little bit of a teaser here. For the past 3 years, over between the hash marks on Substack, I run a survey of a handful of NFL general managers, coaches, scouts, current players in my Rolodex. Ask them a series of questions about the upcoming year. Try to get a feel for how people inside the league are feeling. One of the questions is, give me your Super Bowl matchup. Who are the last two teams standing? The most popular matchup so far in this survey that's going to run next week: Eagles and Ravens. And
Oh
I think
man.
that that's because you look at the talent level on both of these teams, the depth across the roster. Lamar Jackson now with Derrick Henry is a lethal combination, as we saw a year ago. They go out and they bring in DeAndre Hopkins. Zay Flowers is ascending, a second year young player. They might have the best secondary in football, certainly the best safety duo. And they're really good up front along both lines. The AFC is the gauntlet. You mentioned the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. They seem to be the kryptonite standing in Lamar Jackson's way of a Super Bowl every single year. Joe Burrow's back and healthy. There wasn't a holdout from Jamar Chase that took up most of the summer, like some people thought that there might have been. The Bengals defense is going to limit their ceiling a little bit, but if you have Joe Burrow and he's healthy and he's on, I'm not betting against the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think the Ravens enter this season in the catbird seat as the team to beat, probably one of the best teams in football. Whether they can get it done in January, that's the biggest question. And it's going to dog Lamar Jackson for his entire career until he gets it done. I do think this is the best chance he has from a roster and supporting cast standpoint that he's had at any point in his career.
Yeah, man. And you got Lamar Jackson, though, 3-5 in the playoffs. So the time is now. He's got to get it done. I think he's 27, been around the league a while now. And this is his opportunity. So the roster with Derrick Henry, I mean, he's playing very well at 32. Speaking of running backs, Saquon Barkley, a guy you were around a lot before when he was with the Giants and now with the Eagles. Can he duplicate what he did last season?
Man, I don't know that the Eagles want him to duplicate what he did last season. I mean, the 2,000 yards is nice and it's spectacular, and he made a run at the record. 345 carries just isn't sustainable, right? And Lane Johnson talked about this a couple weeks ago. You look at one of the ways you can keep him fresh is the play action game. You can limit his touches, still maximize his impact because Jalen Hurts is so mobile. You have all those weapons on the outside, but a team is going to bite on a play fake to Saquon Barkley every single time because of the explosiveness. So maybe you cut the touches down 10, 15% per game. You lean more on the play action. All of a sudden he's going to be fresher down the stretch. You're not worried about the cumulative wear and tear of 345 touches last year on top of whatever you're doing this year. I think he's still going to have, if he stays healthy, a spectacular season. I mean, feels like 1,500 yards, as outrageous as that sounds, seems like it could be in the ballpark for him. The 12.
Oh, now Matt's having technical difficulties. There's a fun night on Lloyd Vance Insider Football here on. Oh, he's back. You back, Matt? Oh,
Right here. Sorry, must have
there
been
you go.
the Wi-Fi
Nah, it's
gremlin.
okay.
Must have
It's
gotten the way of
fine.
things.
No, it's fine. Kevin had some difficulties, and fun night here on Lloyd Vance Inside Football on SR 1029, the Game Coast Sport Digital Network. Matt's still bouncing in and out there. We'll see if he comes back. But yeah, some great stuff Matt has given us in terms of all the Mid Atlantic teams. He's doing his camp tour around the league. Make sure you check out all his stuff on Substack. I really appreciate him coming on. I mean, as he said, uh, we did a lot of stuff together back in the day in our Westchester days, and um, worked at the radio station there, and we'll probably get him back on. And he has a really good podcast with Mike Tanier, one of our favorite guys. We've had Mike on the last two seasons in terms of week one. He's come on as our featured guest and kind of broken everything down. So make sure you check all their stuff out. And I don't know if Matt's going to be able to come back, but we'll just keep going around the league here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. Hold-ins, holdouts. Oh, there's Matt. Matt's back. Oh, no, there. All right, I think he's trying to get in. If he comes on, we'll bring him in. I wanted to talk about the hold-ins, holdout. One of the big ones is the Bengals, and defensive end Trey Hendrickson. He's 30 years old. He is in camp. They're trying to work this deal out, but Mike Brown, their owner, and Duke Tobin, their GM, notoriously they've had issues with paying players. I'll just put it that way. They've already paid Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow has huge contracts, but they got to get Hendrickson sorted out because he is their linchpin. He had NFL high 17 and a half sacks last season. He did report on July 31st, 30th, and what he is looking for is the same contract, kind of what TJ Watt got. TJ Watt's average is 41 million. Miles Garrett 40 million, and then Max Crosby at 35.5. And Hendrickson's right in that ilk. You think they would want to pay him, but it seems like a long drawn out process. And these are the holdouts we're going to keep our eye on. So we already talked about Micah Parsons with Matt, Terry McLaurin, Hendrickson, and then you have Cook, the running back with the Buffalo Bills. I don't think he has much leg to stand on in terms of his holdout. That's a situation where it's like running backs are not getting paid the way they are in the past, and then the thing is, he's not on the level of like Saquon Barkley right now is the highest paid player at that position. So that is the holdout situation here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football 1029 The Game, Coastal Sports Digital Network. We'll move on to our preview section. And now we kind of dropped off on these. We're going to do the AFC East this week. The Buffalo Bills, I'll start with them. Sean McDermott on the hot seat, I think, but he seems to be in good shakes with the Peculiar family. I was watching Hard Knocks; they're featured on that on HBO. The Bills were 13-4 last season, number one in this division. I think they've won it 5 straight seasons. They beat Denver in the wild card round. Lamar Jackson, we talked about them in Baltimore. They beat them in the divisional round, but they lost to Kansas City in the conference championship. Very close game. A lot of people say, "Oh, Knox catches that ball." Uh, it's a different story, and but he did drop it, and Kansas City went on to the Super Bowl, but they were waxed by the Eagles. When I look at the Buffalo Bills in terms of their roster, you have Kenyon Coleman at the receiver position. They drafted him in the second round of 2024. They're looking for him to kind of make that leap forward. They brought over Joshua Palmer from the LA Chargers, more of a deep threat. We'll see what he has. And then you have Shakir Khalil as Shakir's their main slot guy. He had over 100 targets for them last season. They did give him an extension. He is kind of battling a leg injury at this time in training camp, but I think he's going to be the main guy. Also, you have Elijah Moore and Curtis Samuel on this team. So they do have some targets, but not that main number one, in my opinion. Its offense is all built around the quarterback, the MVP of the National Football League, Josh Allen. 2018 first rounder. I can't believe, wow, time has flown. He's still their starter and finally broke through as MVP, but obviously you'd like to see him beat Patrick Mahomes when it mattered most. He's had some difficulty beating him in the playoffs, beating him in the regular season, but not in the playoffs. And the offensive line has Deion Dawkins. They're all pro from Temple at left tackle. And then some moving pieces there. David Edwards coming over from the Rams. You have McGovern coming over from Dallas at the center position. Osiris Torrance at the right guard, and then Spencer Brown at the right tackle. But the line's built around Deion Dawkins. James Cook, as I said, he is holding in. A lot of contract dispute there, so he's their number one running back. Ty Johnson did a really good job for them in terms of coming out of the backfield, catching the football last season. Ray Davis, who just showed in a preseason game, he can kick too. He's their emergency kicker. He kicked an extra point. That was pretty interesting. Ran pretty hard. He was a 4th-round draft pick last season. Tight ends, Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid, both of them kind of played better early on in their careers, but they kind of stumbled. They're not the 1-2 punch that everybody thought they would be. But the Bills may need them because just not a lot of depth of talent at the wide receiver position. Defensively, defensive ends, Greg Russo, they have him. Daquan Jones coming over from Carolina, Larry Obajobi coming from the Steelers. Ed Oliver's their best guy on their defensive line, and they're bringing over Joey Bosa. So they need Joey Bosa to be healthy. The Chargers decided he wasn't worth the money. They kind of stepped away from him. They do have Matt Milano back. Milano was a key guy last season. They got him back from injury, and he should be totally healthy in the middle for them. And then the secondary, you're hoping that Christian Bernard can come back healthy. Uh, Damar Hamlin, what a great story in terms of comeback player. You know, everybody knows about what happened to him on that Monday Night Football. He played very well last season as a starter. Taylor Rapp's there as well. They did draft Maxwell Harrison out of the University of Kentucky in the first round, and then they have Nickelback Teron Johnson. So they're over under for wins. And Vegas is thinking, okay, this is going to be a very good team. The Buffalo Bills, 11.5 is their over under in terms of wins. I do think that they're going to easily hit that number because when you look at this division, they're the kings of this division, and the other teams are kind of struggling. The Jets are kind of rebuilding under Aaron Glenn. We'll see what they have in terms of the quarterback position in Justin Fields. And then the Miami Dolphins, Tua has his concussion situation. Mike McDaniel probably on one of the hottest seats in the National Football League, and we'll go over those two teams in a few minutes. And let's face it, the Bills, if they're at home, they're 8-0 at home, 5-1 in the division. So that just shows you the dominance of them in terms of the AFC East, and I don't see that changing. They were one of the highest scoring teams last year, averaging uh, 31 points per game, which was 525 points, which was first or second in NFL with them and the Lions. And then the defense is where they're going to need to improve, and that's why everybody's kind of saying, okay, Sean McDermott, you were supposed to be a defensive genius, you know, learning under Jim Johnson with the Philadelphia Eagles all those years ago. The defense allowed about 22 points per game, and there were key situations against the Chiefs in particular in that conference championship where they did not get the stop they needed. In looking at the Bills' schedule, they faced 6 teams that were in the playoffs last season. Big game right away to start. They had Baltimore Ravens on September 7th. That's Sunday Night Football on NBC. Everybody's really looking forward to that game. And then week 9, they host the Kansas City Chiefs. Another marquee game is week 17. They host the Philadelphia Eagles. They also play Joe Burrow, who's kind of been an interesting matchup for them, and Cincinnati Bengals week 14. So a lot of interesting game for the Bills, but I still think that they are cream of the AFC East. Not a lot of big defections on this team. You know, guys like Mac Hollins, Von Miller, who's a little up in age, who's now on the Commanders, Amari Cooper, who's a free agent. So I expect them to be right in the mix. And Brandon Bean, the general manager there, Sean McDermott, they're doing a nice job. We're here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coastal Sports Digital Network. Matt Lombardo was on earlier talking about his camp tour, flying solo this evening as my tag team partner Kevin Midgette had some technical difficulties, but we will roll on. The second team in the AFC East that I will talk about is the New York Jets. And it's interesting because I have a lot of New Jersey friends and people that I talk to, and they're excited about, you know, Aaron Glenn coming there and Tanner Inkstrand coming as an offensive coordinator. The Jets 5-12 last season. Um, Last time in the playoffs for this team was 2010. So longest drought in the National Football League. Their fans, you know, they're rabid. You know, some compare them to the Eagles fans in terms of just their passion for their team, but the Jets fans have not had a lot to, you know, cheer about lately. Woody Johnson, the owner, a lot of people are putting pressure on him. He did bring in Darren Malgi as the GM, and we talked about Aaron Glenn coming over as D coordinator is Steve Wilkes. So they're trying to change the makeup of this team. They did give a 4-year, $130 million extension to Garrett Wilson at the receiver position. So you fantasy football players, I think that's a guy that you really need to keep an eye on. But the other receivers, there's just not there a lot there in terms of, okay, can any of these guys step up and be the guy to help out Garrett Wilson? You have Josh Reynolds, who came over from Jacksonville, but a lot of people remember him with the Lions. Alan Lazard's still there, so he's still there, left over from the Aaron Rodgers experiment that was such a big failure. Um, we'll see what he has left. You have Arian Smith, who was a fourth round pick. He's there. Tyler Johnson from the Rams, who won a Super Bowl ring with the Tampa Bay Bucks and Tom Brady. And Xavier Gibson, who got kind of banged up, very fast guy who's good on special teams. So receiver group, you're kind of like, eh. And then you got to talk about the offensive line. The offensive line for the Jets has kind of been their Achilles heel the last couple of seasons. Tried to fix it in the draft a lot. They have Oli Fasano coming from Penn State in the first round last season. He's going to take over at left tackle. John Simpson at the left guard position. Joe Tipman at center. Uh, Vere Tucker is at the right guard, and then they drafted Armand Membu, a very big tackle. He's going to start at right tackle for them from Missouri. He's got good arms, good length, good punch, and I think he's going to help that line out. Now it's back to the future in terms of the tight end. Uh, the son of Jason Taylor, former Jet Mason Taylor's coming in here. We'll see what he brings to the table. He's been a little banged up in training camp, but they think that he's going to be able to step right in at the tight end position and be the starter for them. Quarterback, this is what everybody's saying. All right, he's finally getting a chance. You know, my son Nate, who I have on the show a lot, him and I have been talking about Justin Fields a lot, and Justin Fields, is he ready to be a starter? He played so well at Ohio State. You know, he was a big time quarterback there, and kind of was up and down in terms of his Bears career. And then with the Steelers last season, he did have 6 starts. He was 4-2 in those starts and had a 66 completion percentage, and he did rush for 289 and 5 touchdowns. So he did have glimpses there, and I'm hearing that Tanner Ingstrand is going to set up a read option offense, and that's really going to help Justin Fields. And we saw that in the kind of in the preseason game. He looked pretty good in my opinion in terms of the Jets. They beat the Packers 30-10 this week, and you had Fields make some plays with his legs and his arms, and the thing is, I think he's going to the playbook's going to be centered around him. And I think he's going to get a much better opportunity than he did with Chicago Bears, who were just kind of a mess. And you had the whole Matt Eberflus situation. And the thing is, though, with the Jets, do they have enough pieces around Justin Fields? So Brees Hall is at the running back position now. Hall had his opportunities. I think this season they're going to give him a chance coming out of camp to be a definitive number one. But they do have Braylon Allen there out of Wisconsin and Isaiah Davis, who they also drafted last season. So the running back carries may be split up for the Jets, but there is some talent there. Nowhere to go but up, though. In the division last year, they were 2-4. Last 5 games, 2-3. Defensively, everybody knows all the names. They're always talking about, man, they got a lot of names on this defense, but they got to live up to expectations. You know, the defense allowed almost 24 points per game, and that just can't be had with all the first round draft picks they have on this defense. So they have Will McDonald the fourth. He's at defensive end. They got him in 2023. They have Derek Namdi coming over from the Kansas City Chiefs, and then the two Williams brothers. You know, Quinnen Williams, one of the best at right defensive tackle, first round pick in 2019. I can't believe it's been that long. Jermaine Johnson, first round pick 2022. And then you have Quincy Williams, Quinnen's brother, Sherwood and middle linebacker. So they run 2 linebackers. And then in the secondary, everybody's talking about Sauce Gardner. And they did give him his big extension. 4 years, $120 million extension. So Sauce got the bag. First round pick in 2022. Tony Adams at safety, along with Andre Cisco coming over from Jacksonville. And then with Reed moving on at the corner position, it's Brandon Stevens coming over from Baltimore Ravens, and you have Michael Carter the second as their nickel back. So a lot of big names on that defense, and Steve Wilkes has done a good job in the past in terms of coordinating. He did some good work in the past for the Niners, working for them as a coordinator. Now Robert Salah, the head coach, is gone, and they're trying to build up there. But the story of the Jets last season, obviously, that everybody knows, is the failed Aaron Rodgers experiment, and the team has finally moved on from that. And now he's kind of the Steelers' um, headache. And I was going to ask Matt about that, but we'll bring him back on and get his report from Steelers camp in terms of how Aaron Rodgers is adjusting to his new team. Uh, but in terms of questions for this Jets, is this a complete rebuild? Is this a partial reboot? Um, I say that they will get better, uh, but the over under win total for this team is only 5.5. So Vegas is not, they think they're not going to be much better than they were last year. So I think maybe they can get to 6 wins to get over that 5.5, but they do face 7 playoff teams, including they open the season with hosting the Steelers. They have the Bills in week 2. They have Tampa Bay in week 3, and then they're at Miami where they've kind of played bad in the past. So there's some tough games to start with, and you always wonder if a team gets off to a bad start, where is that team going to go from there? They don't have their bye until week 9. They're at the Ravens week 12. Um, and then they have they end the season at Buffalo in week 18. So some tough game for the Jets. I think they will be better, but I don't think they're making the playoffs. A team that I do think has a chance to make the playoffs, and a couple weeks ago we were talking about surprise teams that we're picking, is the New England Patriots. Last season under Gerard Mayo was kind of a players coach situation. He had Gerard Mayo playing cards with the players allegedly on the plane, and not getting his playbook and all that. And Robert Kraft got rid of him after one season. So that just, when you see a guy, a team stepping away from a guy after one season, it's usually a total disaster. And that's what it was. They're bringing Mike Vrabel over, who was a head coach for a number of years for the Tennessee Titans. He's going to bring that disciplined style to a Patriots team 4-13 last season. Also is bringing his buddy Josh McDaniels at the offense coordinator position. Terrell Williams is going to be your defensive coordinator for them. Elliott Wolf is taking over as the GM because we know they didn't have a GM for a lot of years. At receiver position, they're counting on Stephon Diggs. And Stephon Diggs has got to step up. Last season, only 47 receptions for 495 yards in 8 games with the Houston Texans before he tore his knee up. And that snapped a string of 6 straight 1,000-yard receiver seasons going back to his days with the Bills. The Patriots need him to be explosive because when you're looking at this receiver group, it's Diggs and then a bunch of guys. You have Matt Collins coming over from the Buffalo Bills. Then you have guys like uh, Keyshawn Butte is already there. Demario Douglas already there. Kendrick Bourne. They drafted Kyle Williams in the 3rd round. Jalen Polk, a former 2nd-round pick in 2024, who's kind of bounced around. Javon Baker, a 4th-round pick in 2024. It hasn't really kind of, came together. So this receiver group, they got to do better because this team only scored 289 points a game, 2980 points for a season, which is 17 points per game, which is just awful. So, there's nowhere to go up for them. A key piece for the Patriots is they drafted Will Campbell out of LSU uh, in the 1st round, and they're counting on him to be that road grader. He did score very well at the combine, and people are looking for big things for him as an anchor for the Patriots. So he's there. They have Garrett Bradbury coming over from Minnesota, a very good, underrated center, and then Michael Owenu, who is done a good job at guard for them, a 6th-round pick in 2020, and then they have Morgan Moses, the veteran, coming over from the Jets to man at right tackle. So the offensive line should be better. Tight end position, Everyone knows that it was always Gronk territory for the Patriots. They're still looking for that guy. Hunter Henry uh, had a pretty good season last season. He's good in space. He's good in the red zone, and I expect some good things from Drake May with him. So uh, look for him for the tight end position. You have Drake May. He's ascending. Drake May. A lot of people talking about Bo Nix, talking me that 2024 first rounder is really going to jump out. I think Drake May can make that step this season because he can move around the pocket, he can throw and make plays. So I see that Drake May could be the guy. His backup is Josh Dobbs. Running back is interesting because you have Ramondre Stevenson still there, kind of a workhorse type, but everybody in the league is talking about Travion Henderson, the second round pick this season from Ohio State. This weekend in the first preseason game, I mean, he took the opening kickoff over 100 yards for a touchdown, and you saw just his speed was just incredible. I mean, this kid, if you're getting fantasy football wise, definitely put him on your radar because I think he's going to catch a lot of passes. Dual threat guy, Travion Henderson looks good in terms of moving in space, catching the football, and you saw that on that kick return, just about how explosive he was. The Patriots won 48-18 over Washington Commanders. It looked like the Patriots are playing. The Commanders kind of look like we're in like we don't care mode, and I think they need to figure out that Terry McLaurin situation. Uh, Defense was always the Patriots' calling card in terms of when they had Belichick. League low 28 sacks last season. They just got to get to the quarterback. They got to do a lot better. So they brought over Milton Williams for the Philadelphia Eagles. He had 5 sacks from the tackle position. They're going to move him kind of out to the edge, but he did a nice job for Super Bowl champion Eagles. You have Tonga coming over from Arizona, and then Christian Barmore. Harold Landry's coming over from Tennessee Titans. Robert Spillane at the linebacker position, they're counting on him. Carlton Davis coming over from Detroit, very good veteran corner. You have Kyle Duggar, who I've always liked at strong safety position, drill Peppers at free safety, and then Christian Gonzalez, I think one of the best corners in the game. As long as he's healthy, I think that could be a good pairing with him and Carlton Davis. And this could be a team that could make that jump. So the key thing for them is they're probably going to need to get off to a hot start. Last season they did not finish well. They were 1-4 in their last 5 games. Did not play well in division where they were 2-4 or at home where they were 2-6. So the Patriots are looking for a better situation. Over under is 7.5. I think they're going to beat that. I really do. I think they can get to 10 wins, get to one of that 6th or 7th playoff spot. In looking at their record and who they're going to play in 2024, they're at the Buffalo Bills in week 5. It's a tough game. They're at Tennessee in week 10. They're at Cincinnati in week 12. They have their bye in week 14. They host Buffalo in week 15, at Baltimore in week 16, and then they have the Jets and Miami to close the season out. So some winnable games for the Patriots. They're playing like New Orleans. They play Carolina. They play Cleveland. So they have some winnable games. I think that the Patriots are going to be one of those surprise teams to jump ahead. So watch out for the Patriots in this division. We're looking at the AFC East here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. The last team is the Miami Dolphins, and I just can't get a beat on the Dolphins. They finished 8-9 last season. Just a very inconsistent team. Mike McDaniel, their head coach, one time everybody thought he was a genius, but he has only one win of, of a team over 500. So he beats all the bad teams, but the good teams he can't beat them. So Mike McDaniel's there, Frank Smith, their offensive coordinator, who I think just carries McDaniel's clipboard. And then you have Anthony Weaver as the defensive coordinator. He came over from Houston Texans, former player with the Ravens. So when I look at the Dolphins, they got a lot of work to do because last season everybody said, oh, they have so much offensive firepower, and they only scored 20 points per game. And then defensively, they got rid of Vic Fangio, and they said, oh, okay, he was a problem. But the defense allowed 21.4 points per game. So they allowed more points than they scored. And offensively, they have a lineup where it's like fantasy football city. You have Jalen Waddle at receiver, you have Tariq Hill at receiver, you have Nick Westbrook Ikine coming over from Tennessee. So there's a lot of pieces in terms of the receivers and then Malik Washington as well. The line's kind of been just a mess recently. They did bring over James Daniels, a guard that I like from the Steelers. Aaron Brewer's their center from the Tennessee Titans that they got. He's kind of a battler. And Teron Armstead, their big tackle, retired. So Austin Jackson's kind of moved up. Uh, at tight end, this was a total surprise to me. I couldn't believe they traded Jonnu Smith over to the Steelers. And then they brought back Darren Waller, who's kind of already beat up from the Giants. He's 32 years old. His best season was in 2020. I'm just not sure how that's going to work out. And then, and then at quarterback, the big issue is Tua Tagovailoa only played in 11 games last season. And what's he bringing to the table? They do have Zach Wilson from Denver Broncos, Quentin Ewers, they drafted this season. Running back Chen, one of the best pass catchers in the National Football League at the running back position. They did lose Alexander Madison to a knee injury, so they're going to have to figure out what they're doing there with Jalen Wright, Ollie Gordon, who they brought over in the 6th round this season. But overall, I think Miami, the over/under is 8.5. I'm just not sure they're going to reach that. And then you may see kind of a rebuild because yes, they have a lot of talent and names, to Tariq Hill and the rest of the guys, but I'm just not sure it's going to get done. So another great week here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 Game Coast Sports Network. I really appreciate everybody working through all the technical difficulties that we had this evening. Matt Lombardo was awesome. We're going to bring Matt back. We'll also bring back his partner, Mike Tanier, in the season. Next week, we're going to talk a lot more about week three, actually, preseason games. I'll be attending the Eagles and Browns game. So a lot more to discuss next week. Hopefully, this holdout situations get sorted out and we'll get a lot closer because September 4th is getting closer. Before we know it, it'll be the Eagles and the Cowboys that evening here in Philadelphia when they raise the banner. So talk to you later, and thanks for joining Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coastal Sports Digital Network.